Welcome to a very special deep dive, brought to you by the Nepali Diaspora Network podcast. We are your source for news, views, and insights for Nepalis worldwide.
Absolutely. And today we are unpacking the latest Nepali Diaspora Digest, and there is a lot to get through.
There really is. I mean, if you're listening to this right now, whether you're commuting in London, having your morning coffee in New York, or just winding down in Kathmandu, you already know this isn't just another standard news week.
No, not at all. We're looking at a moment in time that, well, historians and political analysts are going to be dissecting this for decades to come.
Yeah.
Because we have an absolutely unprecedented political earthquake happening at home, and it is directly colliding with a terrifying geopolitical crisis abroad that, frankly, impacts the entire global diaspora.
Right. The scale of what we're looking at today just cannot be overstated. We're navigating between two massive poles.
Right.
On the domestic front, you've got the Rastriya Swatantra Party, the RSP. They have pulled off this election landslide in Nepal that completely shatters conventional political wisdom.
Totally shatters it. And simultaneously, we have this sudden, massive outbreak of war in the Gulf that has put roughly 1.9 million Nepalese workers directly in the crossfire.
So I guess the fundamental question we have to explore for you today is this. How does a country navigate a complete, ground-up domestic political reboot at the exact moment its primary international economic lifeline is threatened?
Right. It is the ultimate stress test for any nation, let alone one undergoing such a rapid transition, and we were watching it unfold in real time.
Okay, let's unpack this domestic political reboot first.
Yeah.
Because I was looking through the data from the election, and my jaw genuinely dropped.
The numbers are pretty wild.
They are. The RSP is a political party that has only existed for about 4 years. 4 years?
4 years, yeah.
And yet they're currently heading for a two-thirds supermajority in Parliament. I saw they were leading in over 105 the 165 first-past-the-post constituencies. And they just swept 14 of the 15 Kathmandu Valley seats. Like, how does a 4-year-old party pull off a tidal wave like this?
Well, the mechanics of the victory are really fascinating. Just to put those numbers into context for anyone trying to, visualize the new parliament.
Yeah, please do.
The RSP vice president is projecting they might take 186 seats in total.
Wow.
Which crosses that crucial two-thirds threshold, which sits at 184 seats. And independent analysts are estimating they might even push closer to 200 once you combine the first-past-the-post races.
Which are the direct local candidate elections.
Exactly. Combine those with the proportional representation votes, the overall popular vote. Meanwhile, the traditional giants of Nepalese politics are just collapsing.
Yeah, the Nepali Congress has, what, just 2 confirmed wins so far? Out in Manang and Mustang?
Right. And the CPN-UML has 0 confirmed wins at this stage.
I think to really understand the magnitude of this upset, we have to look at the individual races, especially Japa 5.
Oh, absolutely. The Japa 5 race is the ultimate David and Goliath scenario.
It really is. I mean, Japa 5 is the stronghold of former Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli. He has won every single election there, except for one back in 2008.
And back in 2022, he commanded over 54,000 votes.
Right. Fast forward to today, and Balen Shah, who is a 35-year-old rapper, civil engineer, former Kathmandu mayor, he is absolutely dismantling that legacy.
It's a fundamental shift.
Balen is leading by a 4.5 to 1 margin. We're talking roughly 15,000 votes for Balen to just over 3,300 for the former prime minister.
What's fascinating here is that specific race is basically the perfect microcosm for the entire country. The old guard is being systematically replaced.
Yeah, you see Ranju Darshana winning Kathmandu 1 with nearly double the votes of her nearest rival.
Exactly. And you see establishment figures like Nepali Congress President Gagan Thapa,
who had really positioned himself as the traditional party's youthful answer to Balen, right?
Right. And he is trailing in Kathmandu 4 to the RSP's Pukar Bam. So what this means for the actual machinery of government is profound.
How so?
If these numbers hold, for the very first time under the 2015 Constitution, one single party might govern Nepal entirely alone.
Which is wild when you consider the history. I mean, since 2008, Nepal has had 14 different governments and 9 prime ministers. It's just been an endless revolving door of fragile coalitions.
14 governments in roughly 18 years. The electorate was deeply, deeply fatigued by the constant backroom deal-making.
Yeah.
This result is the Gen Z mandate in action. There were 800,000 new voters registered for this election, and 2/3 of them belong to Generation Z.
So we are witnessing a direct electoral continuation of the protests we saw last year.
Precisely. Those young voters took the energy from the streets and channeled it directly into the ballot box.
And from an international perspective, this demographic shift is scrambling the geopolitical board too, right?
It is. The data clearly points to a major geopolitical realignment, and obviously we have to view this shift impartially.
Of course.
Left-wing representation in the Nepalese parliament is dropping from roughly 60% down to about 35%.
Okay.
Geopolitical analysts note that the sharp decline could potentially weaken China's strategic influence in the region.
While India might gain some leverage because they actively supported the democratic transition.
Exactly. However, the RSP has publicly advocated for a doctrine of what they call strategic autonomy.
Right. They want Nepal to act as an independent bridge rather than a buffer state between these two massive neighbors.
Right, which is a great concept, but executing that on the global stage is going to require immense diplomatic skill.
For sure. You know, I was reading through the Diaspora Digest, and the thing that struck me wasn't just the election results, but how strange the atmosphere of the election itself was.
It was very paradoxical.
Right. On one hand, you have this incredibly secure environment. They deployed over 339,000 security personnel.
A massive presence.
But the actual voter turnout was only 58.07%. That is the lowest turnout since 1991. Make sense of that for me.
It highlights a really divided national sentiment. The people who did show up delivered an overwhelming, undeniable mandate for change. But a massive portion of the country simply stayed home, perhaps out of apathy or just disillusionment with the process itself.
And while the physical voting booths were peaceful, the digital landscape was absolute chaos.
Oh, chaos.
Election observers reported rampant code of conduct violations online. Social media misinformation was surging exponentially, but the Election Commission only managed to find 2 candidates out of about 100 cases they investigated.
Which shows how ill-equipped the current framework is for digital campaigning.
Oh, and the strangest detail for anyone who was hoping to celebrate the results. Because of the strict election rules, the holy festival celebrations had to be heavily restricted.
Yeah, that was surreal.
No mass musical events, and they set up 68 extra checkpoints across the Kathmandu Valley. Imagine trying to celebrate the Festival of Colors while the biggest political shift in modern history is happening under a strict security lockdown.
The visual of restricted holy celebrations perfectly encapsulates the tension, really. A highly controlled physical environment masking a massive political and digital disruption underneath.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, we need to shift our focus, because while this domestic earthquake was unfolding, a genuinely terrifying geopolitical crisis broke out.
Right.
We have breaking news from West Asia that completely alters the global landscape. On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury.
These were massive, coordinated military strikes on Iran.
Yeah, involving over 50,000 U.S. troops and striking over 1,700 targets. And during this operation, Iran's supreme leader Khamenei was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Tehran.
And the military retaliation from Iran was immediate and widespread.
They launched sweeping drone and ballistic missile strikes across the Gulf, right?
Yes, heavily targeting airports and critical infrastructure across the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
Just to give you a sense of the sheer volume, Kuwait alone had to intercept nearly 100 ballistic missiles and almost 300 drones.
Which brings this global conflict right to Nepal's doorstep in the most tragic way imaginable.
Yes.
If you are listening to this, you likely know someone or have family working in the Gulf.
Yeah.
We have to talk about Diwas Shrestha.
Yes.
Diwas was a 29-year-old man from Gorkha. He was working as a security guard at Zaid International Airport in Abu Dhabi. And he was killed when an Iranian drone struck that facility. He was just 29. The digest mentioned he was actually preparing to get married the next time he visited home. It's just a devastating loss.
It is a profound tragedy, and it really puts a human face on the sheer scale of the vulnerability for the diaspora right now.
Yeah.
Because there are 1.9 million Nepalese workers currently stationed in the Gulf. This is not some distant international news story.
No.
This is a direct, immediate, and terrifying emergency for hundreds of thousands of Nepalese families who are just frantically trying to contact their loved ones.
Exactly. So, with the new government still in the process of forming, who is handling the immediate protection of these citizens?
The interim government has stepped in to take emergency measures. They officially suspended all labor permits for 12 countries in the affected region.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they've launched an emergency online registration portal to track citizens. We are already seeing initial evacuations. 150 people were evacuated from Iraq, 90 who were stranded in Kuwait.
And some from Jeddah and Dubai, too, right?
Yes. 36 pilgrims from Jeddah and 80 workers from Dubai. Furthermore, the interim prime minister has spoken directly with Qatar's prime minister, who assured equal protection for the hundreds of thousands of Nepalese workers residing there.
But the logistical nightmare here is that civilian airspace across the region is rapidly closing down.
That is the major bottleneck right now, yes.
So if airspace is closing and 1.9 million workers are suddenly caught in a conflict zone, the economic shockwaves hitting Nepal have to be seismic. What does this mean for the everyday economy?
Let me put the numbers into context for you because they are staggering. 41% of Nepal's total global remittances come specifically from the Gulf region.
41%.
Yes.
Yeah.
That money, which was roughly 422 billion rupees in just the first half of this fiscal year, makes up 28.6% of Nepal's entire national GDP.
Wow. So to explain what that actually means, if you remove the Gulf remittances tomorrow, nearly a third of Nepal's entire economic activity simply vanishes overnight.
Exactly. It's not just a revenue stream. It is the absolute foundation of the national economy. If those workers are displaced, or if the banking systems they use to send money home are disrupted by missile strikes, that economic engine halts entirely.
And on top of the remittance issue, you have the energy crisis.
Right, the fuel supply.
The Strait of Hormuz, where roughly 20% of the world's oil flows, is effectively closed to shipping. I saw that Brent crude surged past $92 a barrel, and U.S. crude oil jumped over 35% in a single week.
And I know the Nepal Oil Corporation assured the public that they have 13 days of storage.
But that sounds like a Band-Aid, not a solution.
Because it is a Band-Aid. 13 days of storage is merely a buffer against panic buying. It doesn't solve the structural vulnerability at all.
Because Nepal relies entirely on India for its fuel supply.
Right. And India, in turn, imports over 80% of its crude oil directly from the Middle East. The supply chain is incredibly fragile.
So if India's oil supply is choked by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, Nepal's supply is inherently choked as well.
Precisely. The country is facing a dual economic shock. A potential freeze in the vital remittances coming in, coupled with a massive inflationary surge in the cost of fuel going out.
You know, this actually brings up a fascinating and really paradoxical point from the economic data we are looking at.
Okay, what's that?
On paper, Nepal actually has a lot of money right now. The country is sitting on a record $22.47 billion in Forex reserves. They also just secured a $50 million World Bank grant dedicated to digital transformation. And there's a $43.2 million final tranche from the IMF pending board approval.
The macroeconomic indicators certainly show that the national coffers are full.
Right. But if you look at the ground level, it's a completely different story. Bank deposits are swelling by over 400 billion rupees, while private credit has essentially stalled, growing by less than half that amount.
A massive disconnect.
So the money is sitting there in the vaults, but the economic engine is freezing up. Why aren't businesses borrowing and expanding when the banks are full of cash?
Because in the middle of a geopolitical crisis, businesses enter survival mode. It is the ultimate economic paradox. Having massive reserves in the bank means nothing if consumers and business owners are paralyzed by uncertainty.
That makes total sense.
Think about it. You are not going to take out a massive loan to build a new factory or expand your retail business when you aren't sure if your customer base will even have jobs or remittance income next month.
Right. The capital is trapped by fear.
Exactly. And this complex, stalled economy is exactly what the brand new RSP government is inheriting on day one.
It is an incredible trial by fire. And while all of this pressure is building in Kathmandu and the Gulf, we also have some major, highly consequential updates affecting the diaspora in the United States.
Yes, there have been some significant developments there.
And we're looking at this strictly through the lens of the data and the human impact. On February 27th, we saw the largest single deportation flight to Nepal in U.S. history.
It's a very sobering statistic.
95 Nepalese individuals, 92 men and 3 women were deported. These were individuals who had crossed the U.S.-Mexico border, and reports indicate they paid smugglers anywhere between $60,000 and $75,000 each for the journey.
The human desperation involved in taking that risk is profound, and the financial ruin that follows a deportation like this is staggering.
I can't even imagine.
Families often take out massive high-interest loans against their family land just to pay those smugglers. Returning home empty-handed with $75,000 in debt is a multi-generational financial catastrophe.
And the hits to the U.S. diaspora don't stop there. On the legal immigration front, The U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals recently reinstated the termination of temporary protected status, or TPS.
Right. For anyone who might not be familiar with the specifics of U.S. immigration law, temporary protected status is essentially a legal safety net.
Right.
It is a status granted to nationals of certain countries experiencing ongoing armed conflict, environmental disasters like the 2015 earthquake in Nepal, or other extraordinary conditions. It allows them to live and work legally in the United States.
So by terminating that status, you have over 7,000 Nepalese residents who have been building lives, paying taxes, and raising families in the U.S. for nearly a decade, suddenly at immediate risk of losing their legal ability to stay.
Exactly. It creates a massive wave of anxiety and instability for thousands of families who suddenly find themselves in legal limbo.
Look, I know we have just covered a lot of heavy, frankly distressing news, from a war threatening our workers in the Gulf to families facing deportation and the loss of legal status in the U.S.
It is a lot to process.
It is. But I think it's crucial, especially for you listening, that we don't just focus on the hardship. We also need to look at how this community responds when one of their own is in trouble. Because when the chips are down, the Nepalese diaspora steps up in a way that is truly awe-inspiring. Have you seen what is happening with Sabitra Bandari?
Oh, Sabitra Bandari, widely known as Samba, the incredibly talented captain of the women's national football team.
Yes. Samba recently found out she needed an ACL revision surgery. When the official Football Association's financial support fell short of what was needed, she put out a public plea to the community.
And the response was unbelievable.
It was instantaneous. Within just 24 hours, the community raised 14 million rupees domestically. And the international diaspora rallied just as hard, raising another 52,000 New Zealand dollars.
They completely smashed the fundraising target.
They really did. It is such a beautiful, tangible testament to how this community protects its heroes.
It is a genuinely inspiring moment of unity. The diaspora effectively said, "We will not let our captain fall behind." However, this heartwarming story also perfectly illustrates how deeply interconnected our local lives are with global geopolitics.
Because of where the hospital is located.
Precisely. Samba's specialized surgery is scheduled at the Aspetar Orthopedic Hospital, which is located in Qatar.
Ah, right.
Because of the retaliatory military strikes we discussed earlier and the ensuing regional conflict, that airspace is effectively closed. Commercial access to Qatar is incredibly difficult and in many cases impossible right now.
So you have a situation where the funds are secured, the global community rallied beautifully, but an international war is literally standing in the way of her getting health care.
It's a cruel twist of fate.
It really is. And it's not just her medical care being disrupted. The global conflict is hitting everything. Look at the CWC League 2 Cricket Tri-Series that was supposed to take place in Kathmandu.
Right, that was affected too.
Yeah, it had to be postponed indefinitely because the national teams from the UAE and Oman literally could not fly out of their countries.
Wow.
And the CEO of the Nepal Tourism Board was scheduled to present at the massive ITB Berlin Tourism Fair in Germany, and he ended up stranded in Doha during the sudden airspace closures. His team actually had to stand up and read his speech without him.
It just shows how there is no such thing as isolated local news anymore. The local and the global are entirely entangled. Every decision made in Washington, Tehran, or New Delhi echoes directly into the daily lives of Nepalese citizens. But as we look toward the future, there's one more story from the domestic front that I believe perfectly captures the demand for a better tomorrow.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Right before this historic election, 125 children representing 6 different provinces gathered to present their own children's manifesto to the political parties.
That is amazing. What were the specific demands from the kids?
They were highly specific and deeply systemic. They demanded an absolute end to child marriage, pointing out the sobering statistic that a third of girls in Nepal are still married before they turn 18.
That's a huge issue to tackle.
They also demanded fully inclusive education systems, and crucially, they demanded significantly better mental health support, specifically citing the psychological trauma they endured during the political protests last year.
Wow. That serves as a powerful reminder.
It does. Generation Z may have just flexed its political muscle at the ballot box to change the government, but the generation right behind them is already organizing, and they are preparing to hold this new supermajority strictly accountable.
That is incredibly powerful. The youth are not waiting for permission to shape the future.
Not at all.
And speaking of community resilience, organization and coming together to support one another, whether you're drafting a manifesto, fundraising for a national football captain, or simply trying to navigate daily life in a new country, Having a strong, reliable network is everything.
It really is the foundation of the diaspora.
Which is why we want to give a quick friendly mention to Balayat.uk. If you are part of the diaspora currently living in the UK, Balayat.uk is a really fantastic classifieds platform built specifically by and for the community.
It's a great resource.
You can use it to find jobs, look for housing, discover local community events, and support Nepalese-owned businesses right in your area. It is totally focused on helping Nepalese connect and thrive in the UK. So definitely check them out if you're looking to plug into the local network over there. It's a great tool to have in your pocket.
Building those local support systems is vital, especially when navigating the kind of global uncertainty we've been tracking today.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, how do we even begin to synthesize a week that has fundamentally changed both the domestic reality and the international landscape for Nepal?
If we pull all these threads together, the picture is one of extreme, unprecedented transition. Nepal has decisively chosen a new political path. The voters, driven largely by Gen Z, have handed a historic two-thirds supermajority to a brand new party.
Explicitly demanding a total break from the exhausting coalition politics of the past 2 decades.
Exactly. But this new government gets no victory lap. Their very first test is navigating an international crisis in the Gulf that directly threatens the lives of nearly 2 million Nepalese citizens and risks paralyzing the country's entire remittance-based economy.
They basically have to build the airplane while they are already flying it through a hurricane.
It is the absolute definition of hitting the ground running.
For everyone listening, if you want to dive deeper into all of these stories, review the exact data we discussed, and find more valuable resources for the global community, you need to visit nepaldiaspora.net.
Yes, highly recommend checking it out.
You can read the full Nepali Diaspora Digest there and stay connected with accurate, timely updates as this complex situation evolves.
And before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to ponder as you go about your day.
All right, let's hear it.
We have spent a lot of time today talking about how this sudden global war in the Gulf threatens Nepal's economy and its people abroad. But consider this dynamic from a purely political perspective. If the RSP officially secures that two-thirds supermajority, they legally possess the power to unilaterally amend the Constitution.
Oh, wow.
Could this exact moment of extreme external vulnerability, where the entire country's attention is understandably fixated on a terrifying economic and humanitarian crisis in the Middle East, actually provide the perfect distracting cover for radical, unchecked changes to Nepal's democratic foundations while the rest of the world looks the other way?
Wow. That is quite the heavy question to chew on as we watch this new government take shape in the coming weeks.
It certainly is something to watch closely.
Thank you all so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Stay safe, look out for one another, stay connected with your community, and we will catch you next time.